content is no longer just a mere way to get information. It has become a cultural bridge. And the beauty in our model is that we did not tie revenue with consolidation. In fact, we tied revenue with more reach. And so this is where this harmonious part comes together.
Hello and welcome to this special conversation on ETH Insights. I am with a phenomenal guest today, somebody whose body of work is truly very significant in today's time. Stefano Fallaha. Stefano Fallaha, who is the founder and CEO of Podio, Middle East and North Africa's biggest podcast platform, enabling over 100,000 plus creators with AI-driven end-to-end products and solutions and creating conversations for communities. He's also connecting podcasters or creators with communities, creating some wonderful conversations for brands where they can leverage his reach. Stefano, welcome. So delighted to have you at the GBS 2025.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sparing your time to come all the way from Dubai. How has your India experience been? What's India telling you?
Where can I start? Hospitality, your culture, your traditions, your forward-thinking initiatives. It's just been an immense pleasure to be immersed in all of that and just a crunch 2 days filled with networking and amazing insights that I've been learning from everyone across the panels. So thank you for making that happen and for having me.
We are grateful for your presence. Stefano has his roots in Lebanon, and I was telling him that India today is embracing Lebanese food, and street food in India is not complete without shawarma and falafel. The world is shrinking, Stefano.
How does it hungry?
How does it feel to be part of a shrinking global world?
It feels expanding. Let's put it that way. I think people and communities are being shaped around more narrow and hyper local stories. And like you said, it is empowering in a sense because you are getting more and more communities shaped around specific hyper local cultures, and with the world expanding and with the misinformation that we're seeing in the content industry and with the AI rising with generative AI, I think it's more and more important to feel and to belong part of a community.
Wonderful. Talking about your work, Podio has a significant share of the market, a market leader in the podcast space in North Africa and Middle East. How did you discover that there was this hunger for podcasts and that communities need to be connected with conversations?
It was definitely a big opportunity to capitalize on empowering and amplifying stories coming out of the Middle East to the world. So when we started 4 years ago, there was less than 2,000 podcasts in Arabic in total accumulated over a span of a decade. Fast forward today, we have more than 100,000 creators using the Podio platform, reaching tens of millions of listeners across the world. And that says a lot about how people and how consumers are striving to get their content from, because content is no longer just a mere a way to get information. It has become a cultural bridge. And podcasting has the real authentic power to bridge these communities together, to foster communities that want to consume localized content. So think of all the expats that live abroad in the US, in Europe, that are striving to consume localized content from India, localized content from the Arab world, localized content from wherever people are getting. And so it is empowering to see this rise, specifically from the Middle East and North Africa, of this new media and this new medium that is really making trends across the world.
Okay, so what's the transition that you've seen in the Middle East? Because the impression that the world has always had about Middle East was it's a restrictive, very media sensitive sort of geography, and a lot of it was under the control of the government. How are things changing there, if they are?
I think they are for sure. I think the perception has changed. It is less of a perception, more of the reality. The reality is that communities are really handling a big part of that. creators are now becoming, media companies in a sense, right? And everyone's embracing it in the region. In fact, influencers and a lot of influencers from the region, because the region has sided with that up and coming trend. And this says a lot about the region. This says a lot about the countries in the region being forward thinkers of where the creator economy is heading and to support that growth as opposed to come against it.
That seems like a story that's unfolding in the Middle East. I'm a little more curious to understand what are the possibilities because we are part of a global conversation. I'm curious to know what are the possibilities for the world to collaborate with the Middle East.
The Middle East is open to everyone that's doing business. We're seeing Saudi Arabia expanding their global footprint. We're seeing the UAE expanding their global footprint. Qatar, everyone and in the region is embracing that growth. And it also goes the other way around. So the Middle East is also now an exporter. It has always been an exporter and importer, and this balance is coming together, right? From a media perspective, from in various industries, everyone is embracing this new era, and this says a lot about the upcoming years and the possibilities and the opportunities that are coming from the Middle East and created from the Middle East. In fact, lots of people are moving to Dubai. Lots of people are moving and leaving their homes in the UK, in the US, in France, and coming to the region because the opportunity and the golden era of the Middle East is starting to shape and has already started to form.
All right, let me come specifically to your business.
Mhm.
You work on three very distinct pillars. So there's the creator, there is the conversation or the product, and there is the community. In between, there's also a very large conversation that you need to stitch, which is with brands, which is all about monetization. Historically, and especially in India, podcasts haven't had the run that other platforms have had of social influence. How do we monetize podcasts is a very critical question. How are you doing it with Podio?
So, a big part of building an ecosystem, right, is having this trifecta. And this trifecta is making sure that stories and podcasts are discovered, distributed, and monetized. And if one of these are broken, then like an ecosystem cannot be sustainable. And what we did in the region, supply, demand, creator, listener, scale that, built the infrastructure to help creators monetize through different creator economy tools, through mixing and matching brands with the relevant creators and the relevant communities. I think also a big part of what needs to be done is educating brands and advertisers that the virality model is no longer important. It is not about going viral anymore. It is about connecting with the relevant audiences. It is about changing that perception that my brand should go viral and more about my brand should resonate with the relevant audiences and the relevant communities. Because if 5,000 people are loyal to that podcast, then 5,000 people are going to trust the creator and the host of that podcast to convert or to purchase whatever product that brand is trying to sell because they're tuned in for 10, 15, 30, perhaps an hour and more than an hour long. And they're tuned into that podcast as opposed to just scrolling and seeing an ad for 2, 3 seconds and then moving on and getting into that scrolling fatigue. In podcasting, it's not the case. We've seen it influence an election, right? 2024 presidential election was called the podcast election. So if the medium can influence an election, then how can it not influence a community to purchase or follow or trust that brand? And that is the education part that needs to happen on the agency level, on the advertisers, on the spenders, on the brands. And it all goes hand in hand. And this is obviously a joint and community effort that everyone needs to work together to make that happen.
Wonderful. There's also a critical question, and this comes straight from the heart. We also see a lot of conflict in the region. There's been conflict in the Middle East, in the Arab West for a long time. How can podcasts or conversations become an instrument to create an environment where we live harmoniously, where conversations are created so that people can find solace in them, can find comfort in them, and create a path where there's more harmony than conflict?
This is a beautiful question. This is also, a big driver of the mission of what we're trying to do. It's to create a harmonious ecosystem whereby stories and narratives are equally distributed and equally shed light on, and the perception or the discernment happens on the audience level, on the community level. For sure, there's going to be opposing in different communities, but we're going to get to a point where these communities are healthily having a conversation, and that is the path towards creating a more unified world, a more unified community where communities are not opposing each other, rather having proper conversations and share insights of their bias and of their perception and come to an understanding. And podcasting has the power to do that. It has the power to shed light on what's going on the ground, truthfully, with a raw, authentic, genuine conversation. And then eventually there is going to be balance. We moved from an extreme to another where anyone and everyone that has something to say is going to share their voice. And that shift is important. And then eventually you come to a balance where the two sides live or come up to an agreement in a way or another, whatever that is about, right? I don't get into that. The platform doesn't get into any of the bias or any of, pushing specific, narratives with an agenda. We're not about that. We are a sovereign podcast platform that represents and allows anyone with a voice to share their voice, shed light on the conversation, and come up with a proper and healthy discussion and debate. And it's all about that. It's all about allowing the space for that to happen.
One of the more prominent conversations at GBS was also about global collaboration. Do you foresee a future where platforms across the world, podcast platforms across the world, would come together, collaborate, share knowledge, and create an environment not of competition but of collaboration for greater common good?
I think platforms need to more and more align themselves with what publishers and creators need, as opposed to consolidating audiences for the benefit of the product and for the benefit of higher margins and higher revenue. Platforms need to shift away from that thinking and move towards a place where it's about helping creators and publishers with their reach, with their distribution, and with their revenues. And this has what allowed us to blitzscale. It what has allowed the platform to grow very quickly in a very short amount of time because we were aligned with what creators want, which is easy tools and publishers. Easy tools, more reach through distribution integrations, and more revenue. And the beauty in our model is that we did not tie revenue with consolidation. In fact, we tied revenue with more reach. And so this is where this harmonious part comes together. This is where the two pillars come together. More reach, more revenue. Everyone is happy. The ecosystem is thriving. And this is the sort of thinking that platforms need to have. But in reality, lots of platforms don't have that supporting business model because their business model thrives on consolidation and exclusivity, which is what creators don't want.
A very interesting question that comes to my mind is, you've started off with Arabic. Is there a plan that you have to go to other geographies? Because there could be wonderful stories existing in other parts of the world as well. Is there a plan?
Our starting ground with the MENA was the Middle East and North Africa. And in fact, we closed a significant Series A funding round a few months ago to grow the platform beyond the Arabic world and beyond the Arab world. And because we believe that there are equally stories that need to be shed light on. The same way there are stories that need to be shed light from the Middle East, there are stories in Ukraine that need to be shed light on. There are stories in Latin America. There are stories in India. There are stories in wherever the world and population is present. There are stories that people don't know about and that people have the right to know about. And that is the cultural bridge that we're talking about. That is the mission of the platform, to make sure that we are expanding as rapidly as possible across all these areas where stories need to emerge where stories from Africa need to emerge and be shed light on a global stage.
Wonderful. Finally, what drives Stefano to work every single day? Because I believe that a strong sense of purpose also gives you very bright ideas to create a world that you want. What's the purpose that Stefano lives with?
My purpose is simple. It's to make sure that everyone with a voice has an equal opportunity to get their voice heard. And being brought up and raised in the Middle East, I've always been, fed specific narratives that not necessarily show the truth of what's going on ground. And to me, that is a purpose that drives me to make sure that the discernment happens when we get the full 360 view of what's going on, and narratives are not controlled, narratives are diversified, the landscape is decentralized, and that is something that I believe the world is heading towards. Communities are heading in that direction. Communities are waking up of the fact that historically they were fed specific narratives, and now they're discovering that there are alternative narratives. And it is not up to the platform to decide what narrative should be fed. It is up to the audience, to the community, to get a full 360 view of what's happening and to come up with their own judgment. And that is something that drives us to do more. That is something that drives us to make sure that it is a healthy community, sustainable ecosystem where voices are distributed and monetized, and where creators and anyone with a voice and a story can actually generate revenue from their passion and from storytelling. We're storytellers by nature. Humans are storytellers, and we have the opportunity to get that megaphone up and running and to share that story with the world.
Wonderful. On that very optimistic note, we're looking at a world of possibilities with storytellers, with storytelling, and with podcasts. I wish you all the luck with Podio, and I hope your message, your conversations, your stories reach the globe, reach the world, and create a purpose for greater common good. Thank you very much for talking to me. And once again, thank you for coming over to India.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a wonderful conversation, and we hope to see you in the region very soon.
Thank you very much. So that was Stefano Fallaha, who is the founder and CEO of Podio, a premier podcast platform in Middle East and North Africa. And he has grand plans to take conversations beyond the Middle East and North Africa as well, so that the world can collectively listen to global stories of love, compassion, and greater glory. This is ET Edge Insight, wonderful stories from the globe, coming up soon.